Hey everyone! In this video, I am trying out some new to me watercolor paper. This is the Arches brand, or Arche, or Arche, however you tend to say it. I believe it is Arche, and it's French, but I've just been so used to calling it Arches because I see how it's spelled, so yeah, I had a little bit of this watercolor paper a while ago in hot pressed format, and I really did not like it. I used to paint exclusively in hot pressed, and I just kind of thought that this paper was terrible because of that experience. But I think it's a popular opinion that a lot of people don't like the hot press version of this paper, but they really love the cold press version. So I decided to try out this little 9x5 sketchpad, and as far as the paper goes, it's excellent quality. I just really wish the little sketchbook was more substantial, like with a real cover and backing on it and stuff, but I really got it just to try out the paper. So I'm doing a technique also that I used to do a long time ago when I was first painting in watercolor. And I also used to use Canson XL watercolor paper. So that watercolor paper is very heavily sized, it's student grade, and it's made basically to lift mistakes constantly. So when you're trying to advance and you're doing layering in watercolor, it kind of stops working as far as, your results. You can only take so far with that paper. So I used to do a lot of line work, like with my paintbrush, and go in and I only used exclusively synthetic brushes. So back then when I was first doing that, it just kind of looked a certain way that was always expected. And I thought I'd revisit that with this paper and different brushes in different stages, kind of knowing what I know now about the way brushes and paper interact and what I can expect with the layering. So more specifically, what I mean by that is I'm going to take the stiffer brush, my Van Gogh number 6, do the line work, go back in with a softer brush, the silver black velvet, and do a wash to blend everything in, knowing that the water is not going to puddle up on this paper because it's not the heavily sized cellulose paper, and that it's cotton and it will absorb the water. So then once I've got different areas dry, I can go back in and layer and stuff. So I obviously wasn't aware of that when I first started painting. So revisiting this technique with different brushes and better paper should kind of give me the results that I was originally looking for and didn't know why I couldn't get. So I'm using a muted palette, my Daniel Smith. I put this one together. I call it my fall palette because it's got all the muted tones of fall leaves and muted breads, and it's real heavy in the browns. The darks and the shadow colors are like Payne's Gray and Perylene Green. I don't think I used any black in this, but that's also in this palette. So I'm using a very small brush, number 4, I think, synthetic, to do the eyes and the line work and in some of the more detailed areas. But other than that, it was the other brushes that I mentioned and the muted palette of the Daniel Smith paints. So these little roses too are something else I was trying out and thought I'd incorporate it into the portrait because it's just another element that I could put in for interest. But I was watching shorts, like we all do when we're Got nothing better to do. No. I love YouTube. I mean, I learned so much on here. But I came across a little shorts video where someone was doing these quick, loose watercolor roses. And they were basically just laying down some thicker paint in little C shapes in the middle that interlocked and maybe touched or didn't touch. And then around the edges, they would use clean water and press down on the belly of the brush and make these larger C curves around the outer edge of the smaller ones. And then the paint from the inner C curves would bleed into the more wider, wetter pools of the larger C curves. So they would create this bleed effect, and no two are alike, obviously, so you can literally fill like an entire page, and it was really addictive, at least it looked that way when she was doing a bunch of them at one time. And I thought I would try it out too with I have this Renaissance brush that I usually use for gouache, and it holds a decent amount of water, but not as much as obviously the softer brushes. But it's got a really nice point on it, so it was good for putting those little C's in with a thicker paint and then pressing down around the edges. It was just a really good brush for that. So that was kind of like my in-between brush. It's not super soft, and it's stiff enough, but it's got enough body to it that it holds more water than your typical synthetic brush. So it worked pretty good for the roses and the leaves on the roses. And I think the only part that I kind of struggled a little bit was, weirdly enough, with the lips, because I kept laying down paint and like cleaning it back up, and it just really messed up my edges and my little highlight area that I like to leave white. So I ended up kind of reworking that area a little bit, but that just kind of gave a really good testimony to the paper as far as what it could handle, and it seemed to handle that pretty well. So what kind of paper is your guys' favorite paper if you do watercolor or gouache? And have you figured out or discovered the different brushes and paper combinations that you like? Because I think it was fairly recently that it dawned on me that you kind of have to match those up in such a way that you know what to expect with certain brushes and certain paper together, basically because of the water ratio and how much it holds or allows you to lay down so it can absorb properly. I mean, I don't know why it took me so long to figure that out. But I guess watercolor, at least from what I gather from other people, is kind of a difficult medium. You kind of have to let it do its thing and be patient with it and stuff. And there's a lot. It takes a while to learn certain things and how the materials behave together. So I guess, 6 or 7 years. I mean, I think that was plenty long enough to learn that stuff, but I don't know. That's how long it took me anyway. And I really wish they made this paper in a 9x12 actual sketchbook size, because that's really what I'm looking for. If anybody out there knows of 100% cotton watercolor sketchbook that is 9 by 12, not top wire bound, side wire bound portrait size, let me know. Oh yeah, so if you guys want to know the colors that I used, I did say I used my muted Daniel Smith palette, but specifically the colors that I used are, in the beginning I used burnt umber and permanent brown. I used Payne's gray for most of my shadows and areas in the eyes. Quinn scarlet for lips and cheeks and any of the warmth in the face. And Bordeaux and Perylene green for my roses. And then every now and then I kind of mixed all those colors together and pushed them around in the shadows of the hair and around the roses and stuff. And I took a thin wash of some Payne's gray and threw it around the edges in the background, but you know, kind of a limited color palette. Oh, and Yavapai, a genuine for, I mean, I know it's a heavily granulating color, but it's like a brown, yellowish ochre kind of color. But was the main skin tone base. So, yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed this little video, and you're having a good weekend, whenever this video may find you. And enjoy the rest of the painting.